$7 million in 1895. That's what Cornelius Vanderbilt II spent building a summer house. Not a year-round residence, not his primary home. A place to spend 8 weeks escaping the heat of New York City. 70 rooms of Italian marble and gold leaf. 2 years of construction using the finest craftsmen in America. A palace designed to never burn, never crumble, never fade. And it worked. While every other Vanderbilt mansion in New York was demolished, while fortunes collapsed and families scattered, the Breakers still stands. Perfect, pristine, visited by nearly 500,000 people every year. This is the story of how one mansion outlasted everyone. The family who built it, the era that created it, every rival palace that tried to match it. This is about what happens when you build something not just for show, but to last forever. Before we begin, drop a comment below. Have you visited the Breakers? What fascinates you most about these Gilded Age palaces? And if you love these deep dives into American history, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's travel back to Newport, Rhode Island in the summer of 1895, when the greatest summer cottage in America first opened its doors. The $7 million summer cottage. Imagine spending more than $250 million in today's money on a vacation home. That's the Breakers. And the Vanderbilts didn't think twice about it. Newport, Rhode Island, in the 1890s, wasn't just a coastal town. It was where America's richest families came to escape the stifling summers of New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. But escape is the wrong word. They came to compete, to display, to prove that their fortune was bigger, their taste more refined, their mansion more spectacular than everyone else's. The Vanderbilts already had a house in Newport, a wooden mansion they called the Breakers, named after the ocean waves that crashed on the rocks below. Nice enough, comfortable. But in 1892, it burned to the ground. Total loss. And Cornelius Vanderbilt II, standing in the ashes of his summer home, made a decision that would define Newport forever. He would rebuild. But this time, it would be fireproof. This time, it would be the greatest mansion Newport had ever seen. This time, the Vanderbilt name would be literally carved in stone. He hired Richard Morris Hunt, the architect who'd designed the base of the Statue of Liberty, who'd created palatial homes for the Astors and other Vanderbilts. Hunt was America's premier architect, the man you hired when money was no object and perfection was the only standard. Make it Italian Renaissance, Cornelius told him. Make it grand. Make it fireproof. And have it ready in 2 years. 2 years. Most palaces took 4, 5, 6 years to build. Cornelius wanted his in 2. He was 52 years old, running the largest railroad empire in America, and he didn't have time to wait. 2 years. That was the deadline. Hunt designed a palace inspired by the grand villas of 16th century Genoa and Turin. Not a copy, an adaptation. American scale combined with Italian elegance. The structure would be steel-framed, revolutionary for residential construction. The exterior would be Indiana limestone and brick, materials that couldn't burn. The interior would use marble, plaster, rare woods, but installed in ways that fire couldn't spread. 70 rooms. Not as many as Biltmore's 250, but each room in the Breakers was designed for maximum impact. Quality over quantity. Every detail perfect. The construction site became a small city. Over 2,000 workers at the peak. Stonemasons from Italy brought over specifically for the intricate carving. Plasterers who specialized in the elaborate moldings. Craftsmen who worked with gold leaf, rare marble, exotic woods, materials shipped from across the world, limestone from Indiana, marble from Italy and Africa, alabaster from Algeria. The main house covers 1 acre of floor space. 1 acre under one roof. The Great Hall alone rises 50 feet, a soaring space designed to make visitors feel small, insignificant, properly awed. Walls covered in rare Caen stone from France, a massive fireplace you could stand inside, and above, a ceiling painted to look like the sky with clouds drifting across it. Every room had a theme, a purpose, a message. The music room, covered in platinum leaf and rare French boiserie panels from a demolished Parisian mansion. Not gold, platinum was rarer, more expensive, more impressive. The billiard room featured walls of Cipollino marble in shades of green and white. The morning room, where Alice Vanderbilt would receive guests, had walls covered in embossed leather. Original Renaissance paintings hung throughout, purchased from European collections. But here's what makes the Breakers particularly fascinating. It wasn't designed to be lived in year-round. Everything, every room, every detail, every spectacular space was created for 8 to 10 weeks of summer use. That's it. The rest of the year? The house sat empty, furniture covered in dust sheets, windows shuttered, a skeleton staff of maybe 10 people maintaining a 70-room palace that nobody occupied. The waste of it? The sheer extravagance was the point. Only the Vanderbilts could afford to build something this magnificent and barely use it. The bills mounted as construction progressed. Cornelius had estimated maybe $3 or $4 million. The final cost hit $7 million. In 1895 money, adjust for inflation, and you're talking about $250 million or more in today's dollars, for a summer house. His family thought he'd lost his mind. His siblings, who'd all inherited chunks of the Vanderbilt fortune, were building mansions too, certainly. But this was excessive even by Vanderbilt standards. $7 million for 8 weeks a year? Cornelius didn't care. This wasn't just about having a summer house. This was about legacy, about permanence. The family fortune came from railroads, dirty, industrial, nouveau riche money that old New York society looked down on. The Vanderbilts weren't considered real aristocracy. They were jumped-up traders who'd gotten lucky. The Breakers would change that perception. This wasn't some gaudy display of new money. This was culture, taste, architecture worthy of European nobility. The Vanderbilt name carved in stone above the entrance, announcing their arrival in the highest ranks of American society. The construction raced forward. Hunt pushed the workers mercilessly. Cornelius visited constantly, checking progress, demanding perfection, changing details. His wife Alice worked with Hunt on the interior design, selecting fabrics, approving color schemes, positioning furniture. This would be her domain during the summer season, the place where she'd host the parties, the dinners, the events that would cement the Vanderbilts' social position. In the summer of 1895, the Breakers was complete. 2 years, as demanded. $7 million as reality dictated. 70 rooms of impossible luxury, ready for the Vanderbilt family. Cornelius stood in the Great Hall, looking up at that 50-foot ceiling, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd done it. He'd created something that would last forever. Something fireproof, destruction-proof, time-proof. The Breakers would stand as long as America stood. He was right about that, at least. But he had no idea how little time he'd have to enjoy what he'd built, or how quickly his own life would be destroyed by something no amount of money could prevent. Cornelius Vanderbilt II, the brother who got the empire. Born in 1843, Cornelius Vanderbilt II didn't choose his destiny. It chose him. His grandfather, Cornelius Commodore Vanderbilt, built a shipping and railroad empire through ruthless competition and brilliant strategy. When the Commodore died in 1877, he left the largest private fortune in America, about $100 million. In today's terms, that's more than many countries' GDP. But here's the thing about massive fortunes. Somebody has to manage them. And the Commodore didn't believe in splitting empires evenly among children. He believed in primogeniture. Give the bulk to one capable heir, let him maintain and grow it. So the vast majority went to Cornelius's father, William Henry Vanderbilt. William doubled the fortune in just 8 years, from $100 million to $200 million. But the stress killed him. He died in 1885 at 64, collapsing in his Fifth Avenue mansion after years of grueling work managing railroads, investments, and business battles. And the burden passed to Cornelius II, the eldest son. Not the fun Vanderbilt, not the one who married into European nobility or threw legendary parties or made scandalous headlines. Cornelius was the responsible one, the serious one, the one who understood that keeping a fortune required constant vigilance, brutal decisions, long hours, and enormous stress. His younger brothers got to enjoy the money. Willie K. Vanderbilt built Marble House in Newport and spent his time racing yachts. Frederick built mansions and collected art. They'd inherited millions, enough to live in spectacular luxury without working another day. Cornelius inherited the empire, the responsibility, the New York Central Railroad and dozens of other lines, thousands of employees, constant decisions about rates, routes, competition, strikes, regulations. It was a full-time job that consumed his life, and he took it seriously. While his brothers played, Cornelius worked. He was at his desk 6 days a week. He attended board meetings, reviewed financial reports, made strategic decisions that affected millions of dollars and thousands of lives. He was known as fair, but demanding. Not cruel like his grandfather, but not soft either. Business was business. He married Alice Claypool Gwynn in 1867 when he was just 24. Alice came from Cincinnati society, respectable, cultured, appropriate. They had 7 children who survived to adulthood. A proper Gilded Age family, living in a mansion on 5th Avenue at 57th Street, maintaining the Vanderbilt name. But Cornelius felt the weight of expectations constantly. He wasn't just managing his own life. He was managing the family legacy. Every business decision, every social appearance, every dollar spent was scrutinized. The Vanderbilt name meant something, and it was his job to protect it, enhance it, ensure it remained synonymous with success. That's why the breakers mattered so much. It wasn't frivolous spending, it was strategic investment in the family's social position. Newport was where New York society summered. The Astors had their mansion, the Belmonts had theirs. The Vanderbilts needed to compete, to demonstrate that their fortune was as secure and their taste as refined as anyone's. So yes, $7 million for a summer house seemed excessive. But to Cornelius, it was necessary. This was business, just a different kind of business than railroad management. The problem was, Cornelius couldn't separate business from pleasure. Even at Newport, even during those precious 8 weeks of vacation, he worked. Telegraph wires connected the breakers to New York. Messengers delivered reports daily. He'd spend mornings in his study dealing with railroad business, then emerge for lunch, then return to work. Alice would host teas and dinners, while Cornelius worked through correspondence. His siblings noticed he was aging badly. At 50, he looked 60. His hair went white early. His face developed deep lines. He suffered from headaches, insomnia, digestive problems, all stress-related. Doctors told him to slow down, to delegate, to take real vacations. He couldn't, or wouldn't. The empire needed managing, and he was the only one who could do it properly. In September 1896, just over a year after the breakers was completed, Cornelius was at his desk in his 5th Avenue mansion. Normal morning, stack of correspondence, business decisions to make. Then, without warning, the right side of his body went numb. He tried to stand and collapsed. Stroke. Massive. At 54 years old. He survived, but barely. The stroke left him partially paralyzed, his speech slurred, his mind clouded. He could understand what was happening around him, but couldn't fully engage, couldn't work, couldn't run the empire, couldn't do the job that had defined his entire adult life. Alice moved him to the breakers, thinking the sea air might help his recovery. For 2 years, Cornelius lingered in the palace he'd built, wheeled through those magnificent rooms in a chair, able to see but not enjoy, present but absent. The irony was crushing. He'd spent $7 million creating the ultimate summer retreat, and now he was trapped there, barely conscious, unable to appreciate any of it. The Great Hall with its 50-foot ceiling? He stared at it without comprehension. The Platinum Music Room? Meaningless. All those perfect details he'd obsessed over? Wasted on a man whose mind was slowly fading. In September 1899, 3 years after the stroke, Cornelius died. He was 56 years old. He'd owned the breakers for 4 years. 4 summers. Maybe 32 weeks total in the house that cost $7 million. Alice was 50 years old, suddenly widowed, suddenly responsible for a massive fortune and an even more massive house she'd never wanted in the first place. Cornelius had built the breakers for legacy, for the family, for permanence. Now Alice had to figure out what to do with it. The easy answer would have been to sell, cut her losses, take the money, move somewhere simpler. But the Vanderbilt name was carved above the entrance. This house represented something larger than one woman's comfort. It represented the family's position in society, their claim to permanence, their legacy. So Alice made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She would keep the breakers, no matter what it cost, no matter how hard it became. She would maintain this palace, use it every summer, prove that the Vanderbilts belonged in Newport society. It was a decision that would test her for 40 years, because keeping a 70-room palace was expensive, brutally expensive. And the Vanderbilt fortune, solid as it seemed, wouldn't last forever. The night the first breakers burned, November 25th, 1892. Thanksgiving had just passed. Newport was nearly empty. The summer people had long since returned to their city mansions. The Vanderbilts' wooden cottage sat dark and quiet, with only a small caretaker staff inside. Around 6 a.m., someone smelled smoke. By the time they found the source, flames were already racing through the walls. Old wood, dry as kindling. The fire spread faster than anyone could react. Within minutes, entire sections of the house were engulfed. The caretakers fled, grabbing what they could, a few paintings, some silver, whatever was portable and valuable. Everything else burned. The local fire department responded, but what could they do? Their equipment was designed for small-town fires, not mansions. They sprayed water, but it was like trying to stop an avalanche with a garden hose. The flames roared, feeding on decades of accumulated wood, fabric, furnishings. By noon, the house was gone. Nothing left but the stone foundation, some chimneys, and piles of ash still smoking in the cold November air. Cornelius received the telegram in New York. His summer home, the place where his family had vacationed, where his children had grown up spending summers, where memories lived in every room, was gone. Total loss. The financial hit wasn't devastating. The house was insured, and Cornelius was rich enough that losing a summer cottage didn't threaten his fortune. But it was the violation that stung. Fire had invaded his property, destroyed something he owned, taken something from him. Cornelius Vanderbilt II wasn't a man who accepted loss gracefully. He traveled to Newport to survey the damage, walked through the ruins, ash crunching under his shoes. Looked at what remained, not much. Charred beams, broken chimneys, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air weeks later. His children's toys destroyed, family photographs gone, years of accumulated possessions reduced to nothing. Standing there in the ruins, Cornelius made his decision. He would rebuild. But the new breakers would be different. It would be fireproof. Absolutely. Completely fireproof. No wood construction. No vulnerable materials. He would build something that fire couldn't touch, that time couldn't destroy, that would stand for centuries. Money wasn't a concern. Time was the only constraint. The summer season started in late June. If construction began immediately, maybe, just maybe, they could have a new house ready in 2 years. Aggressive timeline. Probably impossible. But Cornelius didn't accept impossible. He summoned Richard Morris Hunt to Newport. Hunt was 65 years old, the most prestigious architect in America, semi-retired and working only on projects that interested him. The two men stood in the ashes together, and Cornelius laid out his vision. I want it Italian Renaissance. I want it grand, bigger than anything else in Newport. I want it fireproof, steel frame, stone exterior, materials that won't burn. And I want it done in 2 years. Hunt must have thought Cornelius was insane. 2 years to design and build a palace with revolutionary fireproof construction, using materials that would need to be quarried, shipped, and installed by craftsmen who didn't exist in America and would need to be imported from Europe? But Hunt was intrigued. This was a challenge worthy of his reputation, and the Vanderbilts paid well. Very well. He accepted the commission. The cause of the fire was never definitively determined. Faulty wiring maybe, a chimney issue, careless smoking. It didn't really matter. What mattered was the lesson. Wood burns. Tradition burns. The past burns. If you want something permanent, you need to build with materials that fire cannot consume. That fire in 1892 changed Newport's architectural landscape forever. Before the breakers burned, most Newport mansions were wooden. Elaborate Victorian cottages, certainly, but still fundamentally wooden structures. After Cornelius rebuilt in fireproof stone and steel, everyone else followed. Marble House, Rosecliff, the Elms. All the great Newport palaces that followed the breakers used fireproof construction. In a way, that fire was the best thing that could have happened to Cornelius's legacy. The old wooden breakers would have rotted, been demolished, forgotten. The new breakers, the fireproof palace, would outlast everything. But first, it had to be built, and that would require engineering and craftsmanship beyond anything American residential construction had attempted. Build it fireproof, build it fast. Richard Morris Hunt had a problem. Actually, he had several problems, all competing for attention. Problem 1, his client wanted a palace built in 2 years. Normal construction time for a house this size? 4 to 6 years minimum. Hunt had to compress that timeline by more than half. Problem 2. Fireproof construction using steel framing was cutting-edge technology, proven in commercial buildings but rarely used in homes. Every detail would need to be engineered from scratch. Problem 3. The craftsmanship Cornelius demanded, Italian Renaissance details, elaborate stone carving, intricate plasterwork, required European artisans who would need to be recruited, transported to America, and managed on site. Problem 4. This wasn't just any house. This was the Vanderbilt statement to Newport society. It had to be perfect. No shortcuts, no compromises. Perfection on an impossible deadline. Hunt started with the structure. Steel framing would be the skeleton, a cage of metal beams that would support everything else. This wasn't common in 1893. Most houses, even mansions, used wood framing. But steel wouldn't burn. Steel was permanent. The frame was fabricated in sections, delivered by rail, and assembled on site like a massive puzzle. The exterior would be Indiana limestone over brick, 2 materials that couldn't burn, installed in layers for maximum fire resistance. But limestone isn't just slapped on a building. Each block had to be cut precisely, fitted perfectly, creating a weatherproof exterior that looked like it had been there for centuries. Hunt designed the house in the style of 16th century Italian palazzos, specifically inspired by villas in Genoa and Turin. Not a copy of any single building, but a synthesis, taking the best elements of Italian Renaissance architecture and adapting them to American scale and purpose. The result was unmistakably Italian in style, but uniquely American in ambition. The main house measures roughly 125,000 square feet, larger than a football field. 4 stories if you count the servants' floor and basement. The exterior features massive columns, elaborate cornices, and carved details that give the building visual weight and grandeur. This wasn't meant to blend in. This was meant to dominate. Hunt worked with a team of specialists. Engineers calculated load-bearing requirements for the steel frame. Stone specialists sourced limestone from Indiana quarries. Italian craftsmen were recruited to handle the decorative carving. Every detail had to be planned in advance because there was no time for mistakes. Construction began in early 1893. The site became a factory. Stonecutters working in temporary sheds, plasterers preparing molds, carpenters building forms for concrete. At peak construction, over 2,000 men worked on the breakers. Not just laborers, skilled craftsmen, many brought from Europe specifically for this project. The Great Hall was Hunt's masterpiece within the masterpiece. 50 feet high, with walls of French Caen limestone, it was designed to awe visitors the moment they entered. A massive fireplace dominated one end, big enough to stand inside, carved with the Vanderbilt family crest. Above, a painted ceiling created the illusion of open sky. The effect was cathedral-like, spiritual almost, making visitors feel small and the house feel eternal. For the interior rooms, Hunt collaborated with specialists. The music room was created by French designer Jules Allard, who sourced original 18th century boiserie panels from a demolished Parisian mansion and incorporated them into the walls. The panels were carved gilded wood, exquisite craftsmanship from the 1700s, now incorporated into an 1890s American palace. But Hunt went further. The walls were also covered in platinum leaf, not gold. Platinum was rarer, more expensive, more impressive. The billiard room used Cipollino marble from Italy, green and white swirled stone that had been quarried since Roman times. Massive slabs were shipped across the Atlantic, cut to precise dimensions, installed by Italian stone specialists who'd learned their trade working on churches and palazzos. The ceiling was elaborate plasterwork covered in gold leaf. Even the light fixtures were custom designed. Throughout the house, Hunt faced the same challenge: how to make fireproof construction look elegant rather than industrial. Steel beams were encased in plaster or hidden behind marble. Heating ducts were concealed in walls. Electrical wiring, another cutting-edge technology, was run through metal conduits rather than exposed. The result was a house that looked traditional, but was technologically revolutionary. The timeline was brutal. Hunt pushed contractors mercilessly. Delays meant penalties. Mistakes meant rework on overtime. Materials had to arrive precisely when needed. Too early and they'd be damaged sitting in storage. Too late and construction would stop. It was logistical warfare, coordinating dozens of trades, hundreds of workers, shipments from 3 continents. Cornelius visited constantly, inspecting progress, demanding updates. He understood construction. He'd built railroad stations, bridges, industrial facilities. He knew what good work looked like and what corner cutting looked like. And he wouldn't tolerate shortcuts. This house would be perfect, or it wouldn't be. Alice worked with Hunt on interior design, selecting fabrics, approving color schemes, positioning furniture. She had refined taste and strong opinions. The Breakers would be her domain during the summer season, her stage for entertaining Newport society. Every detail mattered. By summer 1895, impossibly, the house was complete. 2 years, exactly as demanded. The final cost had ballooned to $7 million, nearly double the initial estimate, but it was finished. 70 rooms of fireproof, earthquake-proof, time-proof magnificence. Hunt stood with Cornelius on the terrace, looking back at what they'd created. The architect was exhausted. The project had consumed 2 years of his life, pushed him harder than any previous work. But he was proud. This was his masterpiece. He'd solved impossible problems, met an impossible deadline, created something that would stand for centuries. Cornelius was satisfied. This was what Vanderbilt money could achieve. This was the legacy he'd leave. A palace that fire couldn't destroy, that time couldn't diminish, that would announce the Vanderbilt name for generations. Neither man knew that Hunt had just 3 years left to live, that Cornelius would suffer a stroke within a year, that all their planning for eternity would be tested almost immediately. But on that summer day in 1895, standing in front of the Breakers for the first time, they'd accomplished something extraordinary. They'd built America's greatest fireproof palace. And unlike Linwood Hall, unlike so many other Gilded Age mansions, this one would survive. Everything. The rooms that made society gasp. Walk through the Breakers' front entrance, and the first thing you see isn't a room, it's a statement. The Great Hall rises 50 feet above you. 50 feet. That's a 5-story building, for an entrance hall. Your eyes travel upward, past the French Caen limestone walls, past the carved details and massive columns, up to the painted ceiling designed to look like clouds drifting across an open sky. The effect is overwhelming. You feel small, insignificant, properly impressed. That was exactly the point. The fireplace alone could hold a dozen people standing inside it. Carved with the Vanderbilt acorn and oak leaf crest, symbols chosen by Cornelius's grandfather to represent strength and endurance. The mantel is so massive it required its own structural support, steel beams hidden in the walls just to hold it up. But the Great Hall was just the introduction. Every room beyond it was designed to surpass the last, creating a crescendo of luxury that left visitors stunned. Turn left from the Great Hall and you enter the music room. This is where Alice held her most important social events, where Newport society gathered for concerts and conversation. The room was created by French designer Jules Allard, and he didn't hold back. The walls are covered in platinum leaf. Not gold, platinum, rarer, more expensive, more Vanderbilt. But the real treasures are the boiserie panels. These aren't reproductions. They're original 18th century carved and gilded wood panels, salvaged from demolished French mansions. Artisans in the 1700s spent months creating these intricate designs, and now they're installed in an American summer cottage. The ceiling is coffered and painted with elaborate designs. The furniture, all original, is positioned precisely for both conversation and viewing performances. A Steinway grand piano, custom-made, sits in the corner. Not just any Steinway, one of their finest, selected specifically for this room's acoustics. Alice hosted musicales here, bringing in professional musicians from New York and Boston to perform for her guests. Tickets to these events were social currency in Newport. If you weren't invited to the Vanderbilt's music room, you simply didn't matter. Cross the Great Hall to the other side, and you reach the billiard room. This was the men's domain. Women weren't typically allowed in here during the Gilded Age. After dinner, the gentlemen would retire to smoke cigars, drink brandy, play billiards, and discuss business away from the ladies. Except Cornelius didn't allow smoking in his billiard room. Think about that. The room specifically designed for men to smoke and relax, and the owner banned smoking. Cornelius was paranoid about fire, understandably after watching his first house burn. So the billiard room became the world's most elaborate non-smoking lounge. The walls are covered in Cipollino marble from Italy, green and white swirled stone. The ceiling is gold leaf over elaborate plasterwork. The billiard table, massive, custom-made, perfectly level, sits in the center, but no cigarettes, no cigars, no pipes. His guests must have found this maddening. But it was Cornelius's house, and his rules applied. The morning room was Alice's private domain, smaller, more intimate than the public rooms. The walls are covered in embossed and painted leather, a traditional technique called cuir de Cordoue. The ceiling features elaborate plasterwork painted in soft colors. This is where Alice would meet with close friends for tea, where she'd handle correspondence, where she'd plan the week's social events. Light streams through tall windows overlooking the lawn and ocean beyond. Every piece of furniture was selected specifically for this room. Every painting positioned precisely. Alice had exquisite taste. Critics might say the Vanderbilts were nouveau riche, but nobody could criticize Alice's decorating. She studied European design, consulted with experts, created rooms that combined comfort with elegance. Up the grand staircase, and yes, there are multiple staircases because servants needed separate routes and couldn't be seen by guests, you reach the family bedrooms. These weren't public spaces, so they're somewhat simpler. Somewhat. We're still talking about rooms with marble fireplaces, elaborate moldings, ensuite bathrooms with fixtures imported from Europe. Cornelius and Alice had separate bedrooms, connected by a private sitting room. This was standard for wealthy couples of the era. Privacy was valued, and separate bedrooms meant you could wake and sleep on your own schedule without disturbing your spouse. Cornelius's room was relatively austere by breaker's standards. He wasn't interested in elaborate decoration. Alice's room was more ornate, with delicate furnishings and soft colors. The guest bedrooms were each unique, decorated in different styles to give recurring guests variety. One might be French Rococo, another Italian Renaissance. a third English country house. Alice wanted her guests to feel like they were staying in different European palaces without leaving Newport. But the most revolutionary spaces weren't the fancy rooms, they were the functional ones. The basement contained a swimming pool, 75 feet long, lined with elaborate tiles. This was 1895. Indoor pools were rare even in public buildings, almost unheard of in private homes. The water was heated, another luxury. There was also a squash court for exercise, storage rooms for luggage and sporting equipment, and extensive servants' quarters. The kitchen was massive, it had to be, to prepare meals for large dinner parties. Multiple ovens, enormous cooking ranges, preparation areas, separate rooms for different types of food storage. The refrigeration system was cutting-edge technology. Most homes still used iceboxes. The breakers had mechanical refrigeration. Servants' quarters occupied the entire fourth floor. Small but adequate rooms for housemaids, valets, cooks, and maintenance staff. There was a servants' dining room, sitting areas, even a small servants' hall for recreation. The Vanderbilts employed about 30 servants year-round to maintain the breakers, increasing to 40 or 50 during the summer season. Every room, from the grandest to the most utilitarian, was designed with the same attention to detail. The doorknobs were custom-designed bronze. The light switches, a new technology, were positioned for convenience. The heating system maintained comfortable temperatures throughout. Nothing was left to chance. When the breakers opened for its first summer season in 1895, Newport society lined up for invitations. Everyone wanted to see what Cornelius had created. The house tours became legendary. Alice would personally guide important guests through selected rooms, explaining the art, the architecture, the European antecedents. It was education disguised as social display. Critics could call the Vanderbilts nouveau riche all they wanted, but nobody could deny that the Breakers was a masterpiece. Hunt had created something that combined European sophistication with American scale and technology. Every room proved that Vanderbilt money, properly applied, could create beauty that rivaled anything the old world had produced. But beautiful rooms were meaningless without the right social context. And Newport in the 1890s wasn't just a resort town. It was a battlefield where America's wealthiest families fought for supremacy. The Breakers was Cornelius's weapon in that war. Newport's Gilded Age War. Understand something about Newport in the 1890s. It wasn't about enjoying the ocean breeze or escaping city heat. Those were excuses. Newport was about competition. Social warfare conducted with mansions instead of weapons. The town sits on a small island off Rhode Island's coast. Beautiful location, mild summer climate, convenient by train from New York and Boston. In the early 1800s, it was a modest resort town where wealthy families rented simple cottages for the summer. Pleasant, quiet, unpretentious. Then the robber barons discovered it. By the 1880s, Newport had transformed into America's most exclusive summer colony. But colony is misleading. This was an oligarchy. Maybe 50 families controlled access. If you weren't accepted by the existing elite, you didn't matter. Your money meant nothing. Your business success meant nothing. Social acceptance was the only currency that counted. And the Vanderbilts, despite their enormous fortune, weren't automatically accepted. The problem was their grandfather, the Commodore. He'd been a ferryman who built a shipping empire through ruthless competition. He cursed like a sailor, had minimal education, didn't care about social niceties. He was rich, certainly, but not refined. Old New York families looked down on him as a jumped-up tradesman. His descendants were trying to overcome that stigma. William Henry Vanderbilt, Cornelius's father, had built culture. He collected art, donated to museums, behaved properly. His children were educated, mannered, appropriate. But the taint of new money lingered. The social arbiter of Newport was Caroline Astor, Mrs. William Astor, known simply as the Mrs. Astor. Her family fortune came from fur trading and New York real estate. Old money, she claimed, though it was really only a generation or two older than Vanderbilt money. But she'd established herself as the gatekeeper of New York and Newport society. If Mrs. Astor invited you to her events, you were in. If she ignored you, you were out. The Astors had their Newport mansion, Beechwood, and Mrs. Astor held court there every summer. The famous 400, the people who supposedly fit in her ballroom and represented the entirety of New York society worth knowing, spent their summers in Newport attending her parties, following her social rules. The Vanderbilts needed to prove they belonged, not just belonged, that they were superior. Richer, more cultured, more powerful. That's why Cornelius's brother, Willie K. Vanderbilt, built Marble House in 1892. It cost $11 million, pure white marble, designed to look like a Greek temple. Willie's wife, Alva, was even more socially ambitious than Mrs. Astor. She wanted to dethrone the Astor dynasty and establish the Vanderbilts as Newport's ruling family. When Marble House opened, it was the most expensive mansion in Newport, the most elaborate, the most impressive. Alva threw parties that made Mrs. Astor's events look provincial. She succeeded. Within a few years, the Vanderbilts had social status equal to the Astors. Then the Breakers opened in 1895. Cornelius hadn't built his palace to compete with his brother, or maybe he had unconsciously. Either way, the Breakers immediately became Newport's ultimate status symbol. Larger than Marble House, more technologically advanced, more historically authentic in its design, and backed by the main line of the Vanderbilt fortune, not a younger brother's inheritance. Other families scrambled to keep up. The Belmonts expanded their mansion. The Berwins built the Elms. Rosecliff was constructed for the Ulrichs family. Each mansion tried to outdo the others, bigger, grander, more expensive. The construction was competitive, conspicuous consumption, but it wasn't just about the buildings. The real competition happened inside them, at dinner parties, balls, afternoon teas. Who hosted the best events? Who wore the most expensive gowns? Whose guest list was most exclusive? Every social event was analyzed, compared, judged. Alice Vanderbilt played this game masterfully. She wasn't loud like her sister-in-law Alva. She was quiet, dignified, proper. She hosted smaller, more intimate events. Her dinner parties were known for exquisite food and sophisticated conversation. She cultivated artists, musicians, intellectuals, not just rich people. The Breakers became known as a place of culture, not just wealth. Her teas were legendary. She'd invite maybe 20 women to the morning room, serve tea in china worth more than most people's houses, and conduct conversation like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Everyone got to speak, but Alice controlled the topics, the tone, the flow. This was power, wielded with teacups instead of gavels. The summer season followed strict patterns. Families arrived in late June, stayed through August, departed after Labor Day. During those 10 weeks, there were balls, dinners, garden parties, yacht races, tennis tournaments, endless events requiring endless preparation, endless expense, endless social maneuvering. The servants worked brutal hours during the season, preparing mansion after mansion for events, serving dinner parties that lasted 5 hours, cleaning up after balls that ran until 3 a.m., then starting again the next day. For the wealthy, this was leisure. For the staff, it was exhausting labor. But here's what made Newport's competition particularly absurd. This was all for 10 weeks. These massive mansions, these armies of servants, these elaborate gardens, all for 2.5 months of use. The rest of the year the houses sat empty. The servants were dismissed or reduced to skeleton crews. The town became quiet, almost deserted. The Vanderbilts would lock up the Breakers in September, return to their Fifth Avenue mansion, and not think about Newport until the following June. 70 rooms sitting empty for 42 weeks. The waste was staggering, but that was the point. Only people rich enough to afford such waste belonged in Newport. This system couldn't last forever. Even in the 1890s, reformers were criticizing the excess. Newspapers published exposés about the cost of Newport mansions, while workers starved in city slums. Social critics condemned the inequality. But in the moment, Newport society believed its reign was permanent. They were wrong. World War I would begin the collapse. The Depression would accelerate it. Estate taxes and changing social values would finish it. Within 50 years, most Newport mansions would be abandoned, sold, converted to other uses. But in 1895, standing in the Breakers' Great Hall, looking up at that 50-foot ceiling, none of that decline was imaginable. This felt permanent, eternal, the natural order of things. Cornelius had won the war. The Breakers was Newport's crown jewel. The Vanderbilt name was secure. Now he just needed to enjoy it. 8 weeks a year. That's all he'd get. And even that would be cut short. 8 weeks of glory, 44 weeks of silence. The pattern repeated every year like clockwork. Late June. The Vanderbilt family would arrive from New York by private rail car. Trunks and trunks of luggage, clothing for every occasion, personal items, books, everything needed for a 10-week stay. The servants would have arrived weeks earlier, opening the house, cleaning every surface, preparing gardens, stocking kitchens. By the time the family walked through the door, everything was perfect. Summer would explode into life. The great hall that had sat silent for 9 months would suddenly echo with voices, footsteps, activity. Dinner parties 3 times a week, afternoon teas, evening music halls. The house would fill with guests, family, friends, business associates, social connections. The 70 rooms would actually be used, their purpose fulfilled. Alice would orchestrate everything. Which guests in which bedrooms, which china for which meals, which musicians for which concerts. The logistics of running the Breakers during the season rivaled running a small hotel. 30 to 50 servants working around the clock, preparing meals, cleaning rooms, maintaining grounds, serving guests. The house became a perpetual motion machine of hospitality. Cornelius would try to relax, but couldn't fully escape work. Telegraph wires connected the Breakers to New York. Messages arrived daily, board decisions, railroad issues, business requiring his attention. He'd spend mornings in his study, dealing with business, then emerge for lunch and afternoon social obligations. He was physically in Newport, but mentally still managing an empire. The children loved it. Summers at the Breakers meant freedom, running on the lawns, swimming, playing tennis, enjoying the ocean. They'd invite friends from other Newport families. There would be impromptu parties, beach outings, sailing expeditions. For them, the Breakers wasn't a showcase. It was home. For 8 weeks, the house fulfilled its purpose. Every room occupied. Every space used. The music room hosted concerts. The billiard room saw endless games. The morning room filled with afternoon visitors. The dining room served elaborate meals to dozens of guests. This was what $7 million bought. 8 weeks of perfect summer living. Then September would arrive. Labor Day marked the end. Families would depart Newport, returning to their city mansions, their real lives. The summer colony would empty like someone pulled a plug. Within days, Newport would transform from bustling social center to quiet coastal town. The Vanderbilts would pack up, trunks and trunks of belongings loaded into railway cars. The servants would begin closing the house, furniture covered in dust sheets, windows shuttered, valuable items packed away in storage, heating systems drained to prevent winter freezing, gardens prepared for winter dormancy. By mid-September, the Breakers would be empty, silent, dark. A skeleton crew, maybe 10 people, would remain year-round. A caretaker couple, a few maintenance workers, minimal staff to prevent the house from deteriorating during the long months of non-use. They'd walk through rooms that had hosted hundreds of guests just weeks earlier, now empty and echoing. They'd check for leaks, maintain systems, ensure nothing broke or rotted. For 44 weeks, the Breakers sat unused. 70 rooms, empty. The Great Hall, silent. The Platinum Music Room, dark. All those elaborate spaces, the billiard room, the morning room, the bedrooms, covered in sheets, waiting for next summer. Think about the economics of this. $7 million to build, thousands in annual maintenance, salaries for year-round staff, property taxes, utilities, all to use the house 8 weeks per year. That's roughly 15% utilization. You'd never run a business that way. But this wasn't business. This was status. and status doesn't answer to accounting. The waste extended beyond just the house. The formal gardens required year-round maintenance, pruning, planting, preparing for next season's displays. Somebody had to do that work, even when nobody was there to see the results. The lawns needed cutting. The paths needed clearing. The grounds of the breakers required constant attention, season after season, whether the family was in residence or not. Winter was particularly hard on the house. Newport winters aren't brutal by northern standards, but they're harsh, freezing temperatures, nor'easters bringing heavy rain and wind, salt air corroding everything. The house would hunker down, surviving, waiting for spring. The caretakers would fight constant battles. Leaks would develop. They always do. Pipes might freeze despite precautions. Windows would need repair. Small problems became larger if not addressed immediately. Maintaining an empty mansion was in some ways harder than maintaining an occupied one. At least with people living there, issues got noticed and fixed quickly. Come April or May, preparations would begin again. A crew of servants would arrive from New York or be hired locally. Rooms would be opened, aired out, cleaned. Dust sheets removed. Windows unshuttered. Furniture polished. The house would wake up, stretching after its long hibernation. By June, the breakers would be perfect again. Fresh flowers in every vase, beds made with crisp linens, kitchens stocked, gardens blooming, ready for the family's arrival and another 8 weeks of glory. This cycle defined the breakers for decades. 8 weeks of life, 44 weeks of waiting, over and over, year after year. A palace built for permanence, used part-time. But for Cornelius, even those 8 weeks were numbered. His health was deteriorating under the stress of managing the family business. The headaches were getting worse. The insomnia was chronic. His doctors warned him to slow down, to actually rest during Newport summers. He couldn't, or wouldn't. The empire demanded constant attention. In September 1896, just over a year after the breakers opened, Cornelius returned to New York from Newport. He'd had a good summer, relatively speaking. The house had been full of guests. Business had been manageable. He'd actually relaxed somewhat, though never completely. Back in the city, back at his desk, the stress returned immediately. Decisions piling up, problems requiring solutions, the weight of responsibility that never lifted. He worked through September into October. Normal schedule, normal stress. Everything seemed normal until the morning it wasn't. The man who died too soon. September 12th, 1896. A Tuesday morning. Cornelius Vanderbilt II is at his desk in his Fifth Avenue mansion, reviewing correspondence. He's 54 years old, middle-aged by modern standards, but in the 1890s, with the stress he's carried for years, his body is much older. He's reading a report. Railroad finances, something routine. Then his vision blurs. The paper in his hand suddenly makes no sense. The letters swim and merge. He tries to stand, but his right leg won't respond. His right arm goes numb, heavy, useless. He calls for help, but the words come out slurred, incomprehensible. Stroke. Massive cerebrovascular event. In 1896, before modern medicine, before any real treatments, a stroke was a death sentence. Not immediate death, sometimes worse. The slow death of losing yourself piece by piece while your body continues living. Doctors are summoned. They examine him, confer, deliver the diagnosis that everyone already knows. Stroke. Severe. He might recover partially. More likely not. All they can do is make him comfortable. Cornelius understands what's happening. That's the cruelest part. His mind is trapped in a body that no longer fully responds. He can't speak clearly. Can't walk. Can't write. Can't work. Can't do any of the things that defined his life. The empire he'd run for decades. Someone else's problem now. Alice makes a decision. They'll move to the breakers. Out of season. The house is closed, but she'll open it. The sea air might help. Quiet might help. Getting away from New York's demands might help. It probably won't, but she has to try. So in October, with the summer season long over and Newport empty, the Vanderbilts return to the Breakers. Not for vacation, not for social events, for medical care and hope. The house is opened, servants are recalled. Cornelius is installed in his bedroom with nurses attending him around the clock. Alice converts her routine entirely to caring for her husband. No social obligations now, no dinners or teas, just watching the man she's been married to for 30 years slowly fade. Cornelius has moments of lucidity, times when he can understand what's said to him, can communicate through gestures if not words. But those moments become rarer. The stroke has damaged too much. His body continues functioning, his heart beats, his lungs breathe, but the man himself is disappearing. He's wheeled through the house sometimes. Nurses push him through rooms he designed, past art he collected, through spaces he'd obsessed over. The great hall with its 50-foot ceiling, the music room with its platinum walls, all that magnificence, all that careful planning, all those millions spent, and now he can barely register it. The irony is crushing. He built the Breakers to last forever, to be the family's statement to the world. He'd planned to enjoy it for decades. Summers with his children, then grandchildren, growing old surrounded by beauty. He got one summer, one single season to enjoy what he'd created before his body betrayed him. Months pass. His condition doesn't improve. The doctors are clear. This is permanent. He'll never work again, never walk unaided, never speak clearly. This is his life now, however long that lasts. And with stroke patients, predicting survival is impossible. He might last months, might last years. Alice maintains hope publicly, but privately she's preparing for widowhood, managing finances, making decisions about the children, handling responsibilities that had been Cornelius's domain. She has no choice. Someone has to run things, and her husband can't. The children visit when they can, but seeing their father this way is painful. The strong, capable man who'd built an empire, who'd commanded respect in boardrooms, who'd created this magnificent house, reduced to a silent presence in a wheelchair. They're losing him while he's still alive. 2 years pass, 2 years of Cornelius existing but not living, 2 years of Alice watching her husband's slow decline, 2 years of the Breakers serving as a hospital rather than a home. September 1899. 3 years after the stroke, 4 years after the Breakers opened. Cornelius's condition worsens. His heart, weakened by years of stress and now 3 years of immobility, is failing. The doctors can do nothing. This is 1899. They have no interventions, no treatments. They can only watch and wait. On September 12th, 1899, exactly 3 years to the day after his stroke, Cornelius Vanderbilt II dies. He's 56 years old. The funeral is held in New York at St. Bartholomew's Church. Society turns out in force. The Astors, other Vanderbilts, business associates, everyone who'd competed with or admired or envied Cornelius during his life. The newspapers cover it extensively. The death of a Vanderbilt is news. But the real story isn't the public mourning. It's what Alice faces now. She's 50 years old, a widow with children still at home, and she's inherited the Breakers. Not just the house, the responsibility of maintaining it, using it, justifying its existence. Cornelius had built it as a legacy, but he'd also been the one with unlimited income to support it. Alice has money, certainly. Widows of Vanderbilts don't starve. But maintaining the Breakers requires constant cash flow, servants' salaries, maintenance, taxes, utilities, repairs. The house consumes money the way it was designed to, constantly, extensively, without end. She could sell it. That would be the practical choice. Take the money, buy something smaller, live comfortably without the burden. Many widows would make that choice. But Alice refuses. The Breakers represents her husband's vision, his statement to the world. Selling it would feel like betrayal, like admitting that Cornelius's dream was impractical, that his legacy couldn't survive his death. So she makes a decision that will define the next 35 years of her life. She will keep the breakers. She will maintain it. She will use it every summer, hosting the same social events, maintaining the same standards. She will prove that what Cornelius built can outlast him. It's a decision born of love and stubbornness in equal measure. A decision that will test her finances, her endurance, her determination. A decision that will ultimately save the breakers from the fate that befell so many other Gilded Age mansions. But first, she has to survive. And survival for a widow with a 70-room palace was going to be harder than anyone imagined. Alice alone in 70 rooms. Summer 1900, the first season without Cornelius. Alice returns to the breakers, and everything is the same. The servants have opened the house perfectly. The gardens are in bloom, the rooms are spotless, nothing has changed physically, but everything feels different. She walks through the great hall, that 50-foot ceiling that had impressed countless guests, and hears only silence. No Cornelius reviewing business correspondence in his study. No sound of his footsteps. The house feels empty even when servants are bustling around her. But Alice Vanderbilt isn't the type to collapse into grief. She's 50 years old, from solid Cincinnati stock, raised with Midwestern practicality beneath the social polish. Cornelius is gone. Life continues. The breakers is her responsibility now, so she opens the house for the season. Smaller gatherings than in previous years, she's in mourning, and elaborate parties would be inappropriate. But she hosts teas, small dinners, intimate musicales. She maintains the social calendar, keeps the Vanderbilt name present in Newport society. This is what Cornelius would have wanted. The bills arrive regularly: servants' salaries, maintenance costs, garden expenses, utilities. Everything costs more than she'd realized when Cornelius was alive and handling finances. She has income. Cornelius left her well provided for. But maintaining the breakers consumes money at a staggering rate. She starts making small economies, nothing dramatic, nothing that would be noticed by guests or society. But she reduces the staff slightly, cuts back on expensive imported flowers, buys fewer new furnishings, small adjustments that save thousands of dollars annually. Her children are mixed blessings. The older ones are launched, married, living their own lives, but she still has younger children at home, requiring education, supervision, social debuts. And they all expect to summer at the breakers. This is their childhood home, their connection to their father. She can't take that away from them. The years pass. 1900, 1905, 1910. Alice maintains the routine. Every June, open the house. Every summer, host events. Every September, close up and return to New York. The pattern Cornelius established continues because Alice refuses to let it stop. But Newport is changing. The absolute supremacy of the old families is eroding. New money keeps arriving. Families from the Midwest, from California, from industries that didn't even exist when the Vanderbilts first built in Newport. The social structure is loosening. The rigid rules are bending. Alice adapts. She's not rigid like Mrs. Astor had been. She welcomes new families if they have taste and manners. The breakers remains important in Newport society, not because Alice demands deference, but because she's genuinely respected. Her decades of proper behavior, her dignified widowhood, her maintenance of standards, it all earns her a position that mere money couldn't buy. The costs keep rising. Everything gets more expensive. Servants demand higher wages. They have more options now, can work in factories or offices instead of domestic service. Maintenance on a 40-year-old house is constant. Roofs need work, systems need updating, things break. Property taxes increase as Newport becomes more developed. Alice starts making harder choices. She closes off parts of the house during the off-season. No point heating or maintaining rooms nobody uses for 44 weeks. She reduces the staff further. The dinner parties become smaller, less frequent. She's still maintaining the breakers, but barely. Her friends notice. Other Newport families are facing the same pressures. The Gilded Age is ending. World War I proved that. The rigid social structure is collapsing. Several families have already sold their Newport mansions or converted them to other uses. The writing is on the wall. These massive summer cottages are unsustainable. But Alice refuses to sell. The Breakers is Cornelius's legacy. It's where her children grew up. It's the physical embodiment of the Vanderbilt family's position in American society. Selling it would be admitting defeat, admitting that what Cornelius built couldn't last even a generation. So she hangs on, summer after summer, year after year, watching her own energy diminish, watching her fortune, while still substantial, slowly drain into the house's endless maintenance needs. By the 1920s, she's in her 70s, still sharp, still capable, but tired. The Breakers demands constant attention. There's always something needing repair, some decision requiring her input. She's managing a 70-room palace essentially alone. Her children help financially, but they have their own lives, their own concerns. The younger generation doesn't understand her attachment to the Breakers. To them, it's just a house. An expensive, impractical house that consumes resources better spent elsewhere. They live in a different era. The 1920s are fast, modern, urban. Massive Newport cottages feel outdated, relics of a vanished world. But Alice persists. Every summer she opens the Breakers. Every summer she maintains standards. Every summer she proves that the Vanderbilts still matter in Newport. It's exhausting. It's expensive. It's probably foolish. But it's what she's committed to doing. She's 75 years old in 1929, still summering at the Breakers, still maintaining the house, still fighting the slow battle against time and economics. She's held on for 30 years since Cornelius died. Surely she can hold on a bit longer. Then October 1929 arrives, the stock market crashes, and everything gets infinitely harder. The depression that should have killed it. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. The stock market collapses, taking American prosperity with it. Fortunes vanish overnight. Banks fail. Businesses close. The entire economic structure that supported Gilded Age excess comes crashing down. Newport empties faster than it ever has before. Families who'd summered there for generations suddenly can't afford it. The mansions close, not just for winter, but permanently. For sale signs appear on properties that had seemed eternal. The summer colony that had defined American high society is disintegrating. The Breakers should have been one of the first casualties. Everything about it is obsolete in Depression-era America. 70 rooms? Absurd when people are homeless. Armies of servants? Impossible when nobody can afford staff. Massive maintenance costs? Unjustifiable when families are starving. Alice is 75 years old, managing this palace on reduced income. The Vanderbilt fortune hasn't vanished, they're still wealthy by any standard. But the cash flow has been severely damaged. Investments have lost value. Income from various holdings has dropped. The money that seemed infinite in 1895 is finite now, and decreasing. She faces impossible choices. Continue maintaining the Breakers at pre-Depression standards. That would drain resources needed for other family obligations, reduce maintenance to bare minimum. That would mean letting the house deteriorate, betraying Cornelius's vision. Sell? After 30 years of fighting to keep it, surrender now? She chooses the middle path, as she has for 3 decades. Severe cuts to expenses while maintaining the essential character of the house. The staff is reduced to absolute minimum, maybe 15 people, where once there were 50. Whole wings of the house are closed permanently. The gardens are simplified. No more elaborate seasonal displays, just basic maintenance. Social events essentially stop. Alice is too old, and the times are too harsh for parties. The music room that once hosted elaborate concerts sits silent. The billiard room sees no games. The dining room, designed for 50 guests, serves family meals for 3 or 4. The Breakers becomes less a social center and more a refuge. Other Newport families give up entirely. Mansion after mansion closes or sells. Some are converted to schools, hotels, apartments, any use that might generate income. Others simply sit vacant, rotting, waiting for someone to decide their fate. The summer colony that had been America's most exclusive retreat becomes a ghost town. But Alice holds on. Not out of pride now, out of stubbornness. She's 80 years old. She's been fighting for this house for 30 years. She's not stopping now. The depression will end eventually. The Vanderbilt fortune, while diminished, is still substantial. She can outlast this crisis. Her children worry. They see their mother, elderly and exhausted, clinging to a house that's consuming the family's resources. They suggest, gently, that maybe it's time to let go. Sell the breakers while it still has value. Use the money for more practical purposes. Cornelius has been dead for 30 years. Nobody would judge them for selling now. Alice refuses. Every suggestion is met with polite but firm rejection. The breakers stays in the family. End of discussion. The maintenance battles never stop. Every winter brings new damage. Every spring reveals new problems. Roofs leak. Repairs are expensive. Paint peels. Repainting the exterior would cost a fortune. Systems fail. The heating system, the plumbing, the electrical work, all aging, all requiring constant attention and money. Alice manages through force of will and careful financial management. She pays bills by priority, what absolutely must be done to prevent catastrophic damage versus what can wait. The house survives, but barely. It's no longer pristine. It's shabby around the edges, worn, showing its age, but it stands. The Depression grinds on. 1930, 1931, 1932, 1933. No end in sight. American capitalism seems to have failed completely. The whole structure that had supported families like the Vanderbilts, the industrial fortunes, the railroad empires, the assumption that wealth would perpetuate across generations, is collapsing. Yet the breakers survives, not thriving, not beautiful, but surviving. Alice's determination keeps it alive when economics says it should die. This 70-room palace that costs thousands monthly to maintain, that generates no income, that serves no practical purpose in Depression-era America. It endures because one elderly widow refuses to let it go. By 1934, Alice is 89 years old. She's outlived Cornelius by 35 years. She's maintained the breakers through World War I, through the Roaring Twenties, through 5 years of depression. She's exhausted every avenue of economy. She's reduced staff to bare minimum. She's closed rooms. She's cut expenses to the bone. And still, every month, the bills arrive. Taxes, utilities, salaries for essential staff, minimum maintenance. The house consumes money simply by existing, and Alice is running out of ways to reduce costs further. Her health is failing now. Decades of stress, of fighting this endless battle, have taken their toll. She's bedridden much of the time. Her mind remains sharp, but her body is giving up. She knows she's near the end, and she knows the breakers will face its greatest test when she's gone. Her daughters, Gladys and Gertrude, visit frequently. They see what's coming. When their mother dies, they'll inherit the breakers, and they'll have to make the decision Alice refused to make for 35 years. Keep it or let it go. Alice dies on April 22nd, 1934. She's 89 years old. She held the breakers for 35 years through impossible circumstances. She's the reason it still exists. But now she's gone, and the palace that killed her husband and consumed her life passes to the next generation. Gladys and Gertrude stand in the great hall, looking up at that 50-foot ceiling, and face the hardest choice of their lives. Their mother sacrificed everything to keep this house. But is their mother's sacrifice reason enough to continue the fight? Or is it time to finally admit what everyone else already knows? That the breakers, magnificent as it is, cannot survive in the modern world. The answer they choose will determine not just the breakers' fate, but establish a model for historic preservation that will save dozens of other endangered mansions. But first, they have to find the courage to do what their mother never could. Let go. The daughter's impossible choice. Spring 1934. Gladys Sechenyi and Gertrude Vanderbilt sit in the breakers' morning room, surrounded by their mother's things, facing a problem that has no good solution. The house is theirs now. All 70 rooms. All the maintenance costs. All the responsibility. All the burden their mother carried for 35 years has just transferred to them, and they don't want it. This isn't their childhood home the way it was for their older siblings. They were young when their father died, spent less time at the breakers, built their adult lives elsewhere. Gladys married a Hungarian count, lives in Europe much of the year. Gertrude has her own life, her own interests. Neither wants to spend the rest of her days managing a Newport palace. But selling seems impossible. Who would buy the breakers in 1934? The Depression has decimated the market for luxury real estate. Nobody's buying 70-room mansions requiring armies of servants. Even wealthy families are downsizing, not expanding. The house might sit on the market for years, deteriorating while they pay maintenance costs and wait for a buyer who will never come. They could simply abandon it, walk away, let the bank or the state take it for unpaid taxes. Other Newport families have done exactly that. Better to lose the house than keep bleeding money maintaining it. But abandonment feels like betrayal of their mother's sacrifice, their father's vision, the Vanderbilt name. The newspapers would have a field day. Vanderbilt heirs abandon historic mansion. The scandal would be enormous. Then someone suggests an alternative. The Preservation Society of Newport County, a small organization dedicated to preserving historic buildings, might be interested in the breakers. Not to buy it, they can't afford to, but to operate it. Open it to tourists. Use admission fees to cover maintenance. Keep it preserved without the family having to manage everything. It's a radical idea. In 1934, house museums are rare. Opening your family's private mansion to paying tourists is something you do when you're desperate, when you failed at every other option. It's admitting you can't maintain your own property. It's inviting strangers to walk through rooms where your parents lived and died. It's turning family history into a commodity. But what's the alternative? Continue what their mother did? Pour money endlessly into maintenance? Sacrifice everything else to keep the house? They don't have their mother's stamina or her obsession, and they can see what everyone else sees. The breakers is a relic. A beautiful, historic, important relic, but a relic nonetheless. It belongs to the past. The question is whether it can survive into the future. Gladys and Gertrude approach the Preservation Society with a proposal. The society can lease the breakers for $1 per year. They'll open it to public tours, charge admission, use the revenue for maintenance. The Vanderbilt family retains ownership, technically, but doesn't have to manage daily operations or pay maintenance costs. It's a compromise that saves face while solving the practical problem. The Preservation Society is interested but cautious. The breakers is magnificent, certainly, but it's also a massive responsibility. Opening a 70-room mansion to tourists requires significant investment, insurance, security, guides, marketing, and there's no guarantee tourists will come. This is 1934. People are struggling to afford food. Who will pay to tour a rich family's summer house? But the Preservation Society recognizes this is a unique opportunity. The breakers is Newport's crown jewel. If they can make this work, it could fund their entire organization. More importantly, it could save other endangered Newport mansions by proving that historic house museums can be financially sustainable. Negotiations take months. Lawyers draft agreements. Insurance companies calculate risks. The details are complicated. Who pays for what repairs? How revenue gets divided? What happens if tourism doesn't generate enough income? But both sides are motivated. The Vanderbilt heirs want to preserve the house without bankrupting themselves. The Preservation Society wants to establish itself as a major force in historic preservation. In 1948, 14 years after Alice's death, the final agreement is signed. The Preservation Society of Newport County will operate the breakers as a house museum. The Vanderbilt family retains ownership of the upper floors. They can still live there during summers if they choose. But the ground floor, all the grand public rooms, will be open to tourists. It's not surrender. It's adaptation. It's recognizing that the breakers can survive only if it serves a new purpose. It was built as a summer cottage for one family. Now it becomes a monument to the Gilded Age for everyone. The first tours begin tentatively. Admission is modest, $1 or $2. Guides lead small groups through the grand rooms, explaining the history, the architecture, the family stories. Visitors are curious, respectful, awed by the opulence. They walk through the Great Hall, stand in the music room with its platinum walls. Imagine what life was like when the Vanderbilts ruled Newport society. And they come. Not in huge numbers at first. This is still the late 1940s, still recovering from war and depression. But they come. Enough to justify the experiment. Enough to cover basic maintenance. Enough to prove the model works. The Vanderbilt daughters watch this transformation with mixed feelings. Pride that their parents' house is being preserved. Sadness that it's no longer truly theirs. Relief that they're no longer responsible for endless maintenance costs. It's complicated, as family legacies always are, but it's working. Other Newport families pay attention. If the breakers can survive as a museum, maybe other mansions can too. Maybe there's a path forward that doesn't require abandonment or demolition. Maybe historic preservation isn't just about saving buildings, it's about creating new purposes for old spaces. The 1950s bring increased tourism. More people have cars, leisure time, interest in history. The breakers becomes a destination. People plan vacations around visiting Newport mansions. What started as an experiment becomes a success story. By the 1960s, the breakers is one of Newport's major attractions. Other mansions have followed its model. The Elms, Marble House, Rosecliff, all opening to tourists under Preservation Society management. Newport transforms from a dying summer colony into a living museum of the Gilded Age. The mansions that seemed doomed find new life serving a new purpose. The Vanderbilt family gradually withdraws from the breakers. The upper floors, which they'd retained rights to, go unused. Maintaining even partial residence becomes impractical. In 1972, 77 years after the house opened, the family donates the breakers entirely to the Preservation Society. No more private ownership, no more family connection. The house belongs to history now. It's the end of the Vanderbilt era at the breakers, but it's also the beginning of the house's survival. Because what Gladys and Gertrude understood, what their mother couldn't accept, is that sometimes letting go is the only way to preserve what matters. Their father built the breakers to last forever. Their mother fought to keep it in the family, but their generation saved it by giving it away. The breakers today, a preservation miracle. Walk up to the breakers today, and you're approaching a house that's 130 years old, built in 1895, survived everything the 20th century threw at it, 2 world wars, the Depression, the collapse of the social structure that created it, decades of changing American values that made Gilded Age excess seem embarrassing rather than impressive. And it's perfect. Not museum perfect with ropes and barriers making it feel sterile. Alive perfect. The limestone facade glows in the sunlight, clean and maintained. The windows aren't boarded. They're clear, letting light flood the interior. The grounds are immaculate, gardens blooming, lawns manicured. This doesn't look like a 130-year-old house. It looks timeless. Over 400,000 people visit the breakers every year. That's more visitors annually than the Vanderbilt family hosted in the entire time they owned it. Every day during the summer season, hundreds of people walk through that entrance, gasp at the Great Hall, explore the rooms that once hosted Newport Society's most exclusive events. The tour guides know everything. They'll tell you about Cornelius building it fireproof after the first house burned, about Alice's 40-year struggle to maintain it, about the daughter's difficult decision to let the Preservation Society take over, about how this house, more than any other, proved that historic mansions could survive in modern America. The rooms are preserved exactly as they were. The platinum music room still shimmers. The billiard room's Cipollino marble still gleams. The Great Hall ceiling still makes visitors crane their necks in wonder. Nothing has been modernized or dumbed down. This is authentic Gilded Age excess. preserved for everyone to see and judge and understand. And people love it. They take thousands of photos. They imagine what it would be like to live here, to host parties in these rooms, to have 70 rooms and an army of servants. Some are impressed. Some are appalled by the inequality it represents. Most are just awed by the craftsmanship, the beauty, the sheer audacity of building something this magnificent for 8 weeks of annual use. The Preservation Society of Newport County has become one of America's most successful historic preservation organizations, largely because of the breakers. The revenue from tours funds not just this mansion's maintenance, but preservation of other historic Newport properties. The model Gladys and Gertrude pioneered, family donation to preservation organization, operation as museum, has been replicated across America. But maintaining the breakers remains expensive, monumentally expensive. A new roof costs millions. Repairing the exterior stonework costs millions. Updating systems while preserving historic integrity costs millions. The admission fees help, but they're never enough. The Preservation Society fundraises constantly, solicits donations, manages endowments, all to keep the breakers standing. Yet it works. Somehow, against all economic logic, this 70-room palace built for one family's summer vacation continues existing 130 years later. It's outlasted the family who built it, outlasted the social structure that supported it, outlasted the economic model that funded it, outlasted every prediction of its demise. Compare the breakers to Linwood Hall. Similar age, similar scale, similarly magnificent. But Linwood is a ruin. The breakers is pristine. Why? Because the breakers found a new purpose. Because the family let go. Because preservation won over pride. Or compare it to all the demolished Vanderbilt mansions, the Fifth Avenue palaces that were torn down for commercial development, the other Newport cottages that rotted and were demolished. The breakers survived not because it was better built or more beautiful, but because at the crucial moment, someone made the right choice. Someone recognized that saving the building mattered more than maintaining family ownership. Today, the breakers isn't just Newport's most visited mansion. It's a symbol of what's possible when preservation is done right, of how historic buildings can serve new purposes while maintaining their integrity, of why the past matters and deserves protection, even when it's uncomfortable or embarrassing. The irony is delicious. Cornelius built the breakers as a private palace, meant to exclude everyone except Newport's elite. Now it's a public museum, welcoming anyone who pays admission. The house designed to demonstrate Vanderbilt superiority now demonstrates American ingenuity, our ability to preserve history, adapt traditions, make the past accessible to everyone. Walk through those 70 rooms today, and you're walking through more than just a house. You're walking through a miracle, a Gilded Age palace that should have been demolished decades ago but survived through determination, adaptation, and the recognition that some things are worth saving even when they're inconvenient. Richard Morris Hunt designed it to last forever. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. The breakers survives not because it's fireproof or structurally sound, though it's both. It survives because Americans decided it should, because we value history, because we recognize that understanding where we came from helps us figure out where we're going. Cornelius spent $7 million building the breakers and got 4 summers to enjoy it. Alice spent 35 years fighting to preserve it and nearly went bankrupt doing so. Gladys and Gertrude gave it away to save it. And now, 130 years later, nearly 500,000 people annually walk through the house they created, preserved, and saved. That's success. Not the success Cornelius envisioned. He wanted a family legacy, a private palace for generations of Vanderbilts. But a better success, a more democratic success. A success that says great architecture belongs to everyone, not just the wealthy. That history is shared heritage, not private property. The breakers stands today as proof that the past can survive, that beauty endures, that the right choices made at crucial moments can save treasures that seemed doomed. It's the Gilded Age palace that outlasted everyone, the robber barons who built Newport's mansions, The social structure that supported them, the economic model that funded them, the family that owned it. Through fire, death, depression, and change, the Breakers survives. Not despite becoming a museum, because it became a museum. That's the survival secret. That's how you make something last forever in America. You share it with everyone.